So as you can see, the main idea of the cost flow assumption is to allocate the cost or to separate the amount as the cost of goods sold and the ending inventory. Okay. So should we put down the $10 as the cost of goods sold, or should we put down the $10 as the inventory? Okay, so that is the main question that we're going to solve by the use of the cost flow assumption. And in particular in accounting under IFRS, we have 3 different cost flow assumptions that we are able to use. Which one to use, again, depends on the company itself. And the first one is specific identification. The second one is the first in, first out, or the FIFO. And the third one is the weighted average, or the moving average. Okay, so we are taking the average. So the first one is the easiest, specific identification. So what that means is the product or the inventory that you have has a specific serial number or identification number or a barcode, anything like that. So when you look at that number, you know when you purchase that and how much it cost you. So you are going to see something like that, especially for expensive products. For example, any electronic products, a car, a vehicle, anything like that. Okay, so that's why whenever you buy a laptop or you buy a TV, you are going to see a serial number. So that is to identify which laptop that is, and they're able to keep track of the inventory as well as for warranty purposes. Okay. So for this one here, you don't really have to think about which one to use because you know which one that is. But the main idea, the main problem is it's pretty expensive because we have to set up a system so that we are going to keep track of every single item. But if you think about a market like this, it may not be very worthwhile. So the other 2 would be for less expensive products or just general day-to-day products. The first one is the first in, first out. So what does it mean by the first in, first out is we are making an assumption saying that the first product that comes into our company, so that is the first one that we purchase, will be the first one that goes out, which is the first one that got sold. Okay, so that may not be very accurate, but we are just making the assumption. So for example, we are going to assume that the one that we purchased last year will be the first that got sold out first. Okay. So that's why if you go to, for example, supermarket, they will usually put the new products at the back and the older products at the front, and that is the first in, first out. Okay. And what that implies is for the cost of goods sold, that would be based on the earlier prices. So for example, back to that example that we just talked about, the cost of goods sold would be the $10 one, because that was purchased earlier than the $100. And what that also means is the ending value of the inventory would be $100, which is based on the most recent price. Okay. So that is the assumption that we are making, and as you can see, that we solve our problem. Another method that company use would be the moving average. So we are not going to make that assumption. Okay. We are not going to make the assumption that the first one that comes in must be the first one that goes out. What we are going to do instead is we are going to take the average. So for example, back to the example, $10 and $100, we would just take the average, and then we would apply that average unit cost to every single product that we have. So for example, in terms of calculating the cost of goods sold, we would take the average cost and then times it by the number of units being sold during the period. And then for the ending inventory, we would take the average cost and then times it by how many units we have left in our warehouse. Okay, so once again, that may not be very accurate, but it's just an assumption that we are making. We are just taking the average. Okay. So there is one more in the past, last in, first out, which is the last one that comes in will be the first one that goes out, but we are not using that anymore. Okay, so that's why we are only having 3 left, which is specific identification, first in, first out, as well as the moving average. Okay, so any questions regarding the concept? Okay, so let's take a look at an example, a very simple example. So calculate the cost of goods sold and the ending inventory under the two different cost flow assumptions. And two cost flow assumptions we are talking about here would be first in, first out, and the moving average. Because we just said that for specific identification, actually we don't really have to do the calculation. We know which one is which. Okay, so we are just going to focus on the last two in terms of the calculation. Okay. So what we have is on January the 1st, this company here purchased 3,000 units at $4 each. So that will be considered as the beginning inventory. And then on the next day, the company purchased another 2,000 units at $5 each. So now you can see that you have a balance of 5,000 units. And then on the 3rd, you are selling 4,000 units at $8 each. So what that means is after the sale, you're only left with 1,000 units. And then on the 6th, you purchase 6,000 units at $6 each. So now you have 7,000 units. And then on the last day, you sold 3,000 units at $10 each. So you're only left with 4,000 units. So in terms of the number of units that you have, it's pretty easy, right? You've got the numbers already. But in terms of the exact amount, we would have to solve for the answers. Okay. So any questions regarding the setup of the question? Okay, so let's take a look at first in, first out first. FIFO, FIFO, first in, first out. Okay. So remember here we are focusing on the cost of goods sold and the ending inventory. So when do we recognize cost of goods sold? Is whenever we make a sale. So that's why our first focus will be on our first sale, which is on January the 3rd. So if you go back, you can see that on January the 3rd, we are selling 4,000 units. So we are selling 4,000 units. So now our question is, does the 4,000 units come from the 3,000 units that we purchased on the 1st? Or the 2,000 units that we purchased on the 2nd? Okay, because they have different cost of goods sold. $4 each and $5 each. So that is our main problem. So what we are going to do is, for the cost of goods sold for the 4,000 units, we are going to assume a first in, first out basis. So what that means is, the first ones that come in, which is the 3,000 units, will be the first ones that got sold. Okay, so that's why we are going with the 3,000 units first, and at $4 each. So 3,000 units times $4. But after that, we still have 1,000 more units to go. Because we are selling 4,000 units, but we only have accounted for 3,000 units. So that's why you have to take 1,000 units more from the second purchase, which is the one on January the 2nd. So here we must take 1,000 units from these 2,000 units at $5 each. So that's why we are adding $5 times 1,000 units from the second batch. And then, if you do the math, you are going to get $17,000. Okay, so the cost of goods sold for the first sale would be $17,000. $3,000 from the beginning inventory, and $1,000 from the next purchase. And in terms of remaining inventory, we have 1,000 units left. And based on our first in, first out assumption, okay, we are going to take the most recent price. Okay, and the most recent price would be $5. Okay, so our ending inventory will be 1,000 units times the $5 would be, which would be $5,000. Okay, $5 each times 1,000 units, that's going to give you 5,000. Any questions about that? And the first purchase here and there refers to the one on January the 1st. So, January the 2nd. January the 2nd. So this one here is the beginning inventory. This is the first purchase. And this is the second purchase. And then we also have to consider the second sale. The second sale that took place on the 10th, the company sold 3,000 units at $10 each. Okay. So now your question is, does the 3,000 units come from the one on the 2nd or the one on the 6th? Okay. And once again, based on the first in, first out assumption, we are going to assume that this one will be sold first, and then this one here. So that's why we are going to take 1,000 units from the first purchase, which is on the 2nd, okay, at $5 each. Remember, we only have 1,000 units left from that purchase, not 2,000 units, because the first 1,000 units have been sold in the first sale. Okay, so we only have 1,000 units left for this one here. So we are going to take 1,000 units from here, and then take 2,000 here to make up the 3,000. Okay, so 5 times 1,000 units plus 6 times 2,000 units. So that's why we have $17,000 again. And then, what about our ending inventory? As you can see, our ending inventory is 4,000 units. Okay. And the 4,000 units will come from the latest purchase that we made, which would be this one here. So that's why we are multiplying $6 by 4,000 units, and that's going to give us 24,000. So the calculation is not very difficult. The main idea here is you have to keep track of every single purchase and every single sale. So you have to make sure you are not losing any purchases or sales. Okay. So what that means is your total cost of goods sold for the 7,000 units from the 2 sales would be 17,000 plus 17,000, which is 34,000. And your ending inventory would be the one that is left, 4,000 units, which is 24,000. Okay. Be careful, do not add this ending inventory in as well, because this one here has been sold. Ending inventory only refers to the one that is left at the very end, which is the 4,000 units. Okay, so for the cost of goods sold, you have to add both the cost of goods sold for the first one and the second one. But for the ending inventory, make sure you do not add the first one. You do not add this one. So any questions regarding first in, first out? It's pretty easy as long as you are keeping track of every single sale and purchase. Okay, now for moving average, it's a little bit more complicated because you would have to calculate the average cost whenever you calculate the sale, or whenever you make a sale. Okay. So average cost after the first purchase. So why are we calculating the average cost after the first purchase? It's because we are going to make a sale after the first purchase. So when should we calculate the average cost? Is whenever we have to calculate the cost of goods sold, which is right before the first sale and right before the second sale, or after the first purchase and after the second purchase. Okay. So in terms of the average cost, by the end or right before the first sale, we would have 5,000 units now. Okay, so that is, we would have to take these two and then take the average. So what we are going to do is we would take 3,000 units times $4 plus 2,000 units times $5, and then all divided by 5,000 units. Okay. So your total cost will be $22,000 right before the first sale. And then divide that by how many units that you have. That will be 5,000 units. So that will be $4.40 per unit. Okay. So again, you have to be very clear in your mind how many units you have at that particular point. Okay. 440 will be your unit cost. So for the first sale, you will just take 440 times 4,000 units, which is the number of units being sold in the first sale. So that would be $17,600. And then in terms of the remaining inventory, you will take the average cost and then times that by how many units you have left in your warehouse.